Tonight, we're going to talk about something a little bit unexpected, kind of goes against the grain of what most of the internet advice is out there for what's going to make your life better, particularly in the masculinity circles, the men's circles. This is definitely an against the grain kind of message. My message in my last video was a bit against the grain as well, but you just have to bear with me on this one. And what is this against the grain thing that's going to give you an edge over your competitors and an edge over yourself, right? Where you're at right now is understanding what pride is and the downfall that can follow from being prideful. Okay. Now, what do I mean by pride? Well, I'm referring to pride in the way that the Catholics might refer to it, okay, with the seven deadly sins. So I've been doing some research. I'm going to actually have a post in my men's community about this. You guys can get in my men's community with a link in the description. Okay, we're dealing with relationship related issues and inner game stuff, and guys are working on their performance, performing better. So it's a community for people who are using performance psychology to improve themselves in a number of different ways. All right. And so that's a resource available to you. And I'm doing a post soon here about, it's going to sound crazy, but the seven deadly sins. Now, I'm not a theologian. I'm not a Bible expert. So I'm not coming at it from that angle. And if you're looking for that, there's other channels for that. Okay. But I'm really coming at it more from a philosophical angle. And it's just very interesting because when you look at these seven deadly sins and their origins and their parallels, there's some pretty wise and good advice here that goes against the grain a little bit of what people are going to tell you. But if you think about it, it really can help change your life and really help things work out better for you. And you can really see when you kind of dissect these seven deadly sins or whatever, right? How philosophically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, how these things can be the downfall of a man. These things can destroy your soul for whatever your concept of soul is. It can at the very least destroy your life, right? And pride is one of those things. And what's interesting, the reason why I'm picking these things here is because these deadly sins is because it's very covert for those who are entrapped by them. When as far as it's very covert how these vices will destroy someone's life. It's very covert how someone who has like the vice of pride, for example, and I'll explain exactly what that means, how that person who's being prideful doesn't think or believe that they're doing anything wrong. Like there's stuff out there that's like obvious that we know is wrong, right? Most people who do something violent to somebody else or steal money from somebody or whatever, they know from a morality perspective they're doing something probably wrong, right? They're doing something illegal, whatever, and they justify their reasons for doing it when they do it. And it happens. And sometimes there's we could call them bad or evil people that do evil things, but most of the time most people fit in a gray area, right? And there's people out there that do good things and then they do bad things. So why do people do the bad things? And a lot of times it's the stories they tell themselves and the BS that they deliver to themselves. Most people tell themselves stories to justify what they do and to justify their own BS. And they allow themselves to continue throughout life making the same mistakes, doing the same stupid stuff. And it also means that they can continue through life doing bad things or evil things to other people, right? And so again, there's some clearly very evil, corrupted people out there, but most people who do bad things or evil things are not necessarily evil people. They're just doing something they shouldn't be doing. And they told themselves a story to justify why it's okay at the time they were doing it. even if they knew it was wrong. But these deadly sins, and we're going to start with pride today, these are a little different because they psychologically and emotionally, we could argue, if you believe in that sort of thing, spiritually, break a person down, and they systematically destroy a person's lives. If you have any of these seven vices, and I'm going to go through each one of them in different videos, and you're not replacing it with different better behaviors, you're going to systematically destroy your life, and you won't even realize or know that it's happening. You're going to be consuming content on YouTube going, oh, how can I make more money? Or how can I do better in this? Or how can I get a better girl or get more sex or, get a cooler car or whatever you're doing, right? You're going to have these things you're trying to do in life. You're going to be finding ways of escaping your problems and entertaining yourself and all those things. And you're just going to be plugging along. And if you have one or more of these seven vices, it's destroying you from the inside. You're not getting what you want. And even if you do get what you want, you're not going to be happy with the results. Okay. It's a way to really systematically, from the inside out, strip you away of your humanity. And people don't realize how serious that is. So I'm not even coming at this from like a theological perspective. Although arguments could be made for those who, believe in a higher power and, especially people of Christian faith, all that stuff. Yeah, the argument could be made about how that is destroying your soul, but I'm not even coming at it from that angle. I'm going to talk about just how it destroys your life and those around you. So even if you're not somebody who is a religious person, this is still very valuable stuff, right? And so let's dive in a little bit deeper. What do I mean by pride? Because that's what we're starting with. So actually, even before I get into that, like these seven deadlies or whatever, there's a lot of cross-referencing. So the Buddhists, for example, have parallel beliefs and ideas of these things being a bad idea. Pride being one of them, greed being another, anger or wrath being another. And you can kind of go down the list. In Islam, they have parallel beliefs as well. Same with other even secular points of view. Like you can trace some of these belief systems into the Greek philosophers and stuff like that. So there's a universality here to these seven concepts, which actually provides us like with good information to say it's probably true. There's probably some truth to that. That's what we call converging evidence. When you have a bunch of different sources and cultural beliefs and backgrounds with different conceptions about the way the world works, all saying pridefulness is bad, for example, now that may be something we need to look at then, right? Now, the internet, especially the men's help space, which is, something that obviously I kind of have my feet into, right? Because I help a lot of men in coaching, is very against the grain here. They are promoting very ego-driven, ideas, right? And that's because these content creators, many of them are very prideful, and they're presenting an illusion to you in order to sell you their products. And so they're presenting this illusion of being this high value man with all this stuff going for them and being, rich and being this and being that. Look how cool I am, and look at me, at the gym working out, and look at me in my cool car, and look at me doing this and look at me doing that, right? And now some of these guys who do that are just marketing, and they're pretty cool, and they're not really prideful people, but many of these people do believe in their own BS, and they start to fall into believing that they're something much greater than they are. All right. And that is the mistake. That's the downfall. So here's the thing about pride. Pride as a vice, okay, isn't the same as being confident or believing in yourself or having dreams or wanting to better yourself, or it's not even the same as wanting to become rich or famous or any of that stuff. I mean, that could be driven by pridefulness, but that by itself, it doesn't have to be driven by a vice of pride. Like there's a lot of people who become rich and famous or, accomplished or whatever, that aren't necessarily prideful. And they're not necessarily captured by this vice, which is, of course, a good thing, right? But the internet tells you to chase after this stuff and to be an arrogant, egotistical prick. When we say pridefulness is a vice, we're really talking about, in psychology speak, narcissistic behavior or narcissism. It's having a delusion of thinking of yourself as much greater than you are. Okay. It's attributing anything that you've like any benefits you've ever had, any good that you ever achieved or had or whatever, attributing it only to yourself and not to other things that have been helpful to you. So there's a lack of gratitude here too. So, like, for example, let's say somebody who's a very successful business owner or a successful hedge fund manager. Yeah, sure, that person is talented in their own right and got to their success by their talents and their efforts and their discipline, motivation, and hard work. But there's also an element of people that helped them along the way, people that believed in them. Let's say it's a hedge fund manager, people that believed in them and put them in the position to manage that hedge fund, right? Over the somebody else that could have put in place that was competing with that person. People believed in them to invest their money in them, or if it's a business, to buy products and to buy things from their business. There's opportunities that happen. There's a lot of things that happen, that you need to be grateful for too. And you need to recognize that as you move along in your life, there are people that are along the way helping you get to where you want. And a pridefulness is ignoring all of that and taking all the credit onto yourself. And it's very, very destructive. Okay. And the reason it's destructive is because it leads to some major fatal flaws. One fatal flaw is it leads to a feeling of entitlement. And I talked about this a bit in my last video, but it leads to this idea that I'm entitled to have something or be something great, even though, like, you're maybe not there yet. Maybe you don't have the skills or talents to be that thing or to have that thing yet. Or maybe you have the skills and talents, but somebody else got a break and you didn't. And so now that the competition is now beating you. And if you're prideful and you think that you're entitled instead of being a grateful person, you're going to let those sorts of things beat you down. You're going to start to hate and you're going to have a lot of negative, bad feelings and emotions about others who are doing better than you are, because you think that you should have that and that they shouldn't. And that leads to some other vices on the list, by the way. But it's really a really destructive and self-destructive mindset. But it always disguises itself as being something good. It disguises yourself as being confident, as being driven, as being, like, there's all kinds of things that happen when you think you should have something and you're going to go for it. But then when you run into obstacles, when you run into disappointments, when you run into some of these things, some people get crushed by those things because they're so entitled that they think that they should have something more than what they have. And of course they don't. And there's that injustice. So it creates, anger, resentment, jealousy, all that stuff based on their own ego, based on their own pride. So that's one way that people make mistakes. And another way is some people will push through it and fight through the obstacles, but they do it in a very hateful way. They're very resentful for the obstacles that are in front of them. They think that they're entitled and they shouldn't have these obstacles, that it's some sort of injustice. And so they're willing to sometimes stab other people in the back and hurt other people on their way to the top, or when they get to a higher level or a higher income, or to the top, so to speak, then they have no charity or care for people that are not at their level yet. And so it creates a pollution of their mind and really of their souls. They just don't, they don't have the ability to care for other people. They look at other people as trying to use them and take things from them, and so on and so forth. Their journey to success, if they even make it there, ends up being one of misery and one of a special little hell that they create for themselves. And that doesn't sound like very much fun to me. Now, the biggest thing I noticed, though, too, about pride is that it creates a lack of accountability. So, like, I talk about this all the time in my coaching. You cannot change something unless you can be accountable, right? And so a lot of people, like, they can't hold themselves accountable. They can't be accountable for their mistakes. They can't be accountable for what they need to do to get better. And that's because of ego protection, pridefulness, right? I deal with a lot of relationship related issues. And so many times guys are like bitching about women or bitching about, the way their girl is, and they're not seeing the mistakes that they're making in that process or the mistakes that they're accepting from their girl. They're accepting the mistakes from their wife or girlfriend, and then they're of course mad about them later. It's like a covert contract sort of thing. And all these things that people will do, men are notorious. Men, you guys are notorious for protecting and guarding your egos. And when you're doing that, you're not looking in the mirror and looking for the flaws and trying to figure out how to correct those flaws or overcome those parts that you need to improve with yourself. Do you see what I'm saying? And so that is this downfall. All right. That is the biggest reason for it destroying your life is when you're prideful, when you're narcissistic, you can't take accountability for yourself. So you can't fix yourself. You can't unask yourself. You are doomed to having the same problems year after year, the same mistakes, being the same, idiot, right? Every single year, being the same asshole, right? 5 years, 10 years, 20, 50 years from now. When people don't change, it's because of this, right? It's because they're egos. It's because they can't look in the mirror and say, you know what? There's some things that about me that are flawed, and I need to fix those things. And I don't need to sit there and beat myself up and feel bad about it and feel shame and woe is me and feel sorry for myself. I just need to recognize that there's some problems and I'm going to go fix those problems. And that's it. And if you're prideful, you can't do that. Some of that woe is me crap. Oh, I'm not a good looking Chad, so I don't get the girls. Oh, I didn't come from money, so I can't be successful. Oh, all that woe is me stuff is coming from an ego. It's coming from pride. You know what I mean? It's like you think you're entitled to have something different than what you have right now. So instead of trying to look and figure out what you need to do to get better and to get the things that you want and achieve your goals, you're sitting here talking about all your disadvantages and crying about them. You see, that's what pride does. That's what your ego does to you, and it'll destroy you. The last part about pride is it kills your gratitude. I'm going to tell you, gratitude is one of the greatest things that you guys can have in life. When you go military guys, it depends because a lot of my military guys, some of you military guys that watch me, we're dysfunctional, right? A lot of us are pretty dysfunctional, but there's a lot of guys too that are some of the most elevated people I've ever met too that have served. And, some of that comes from just being able to have gratitude. Like when you go to some third world country and you're just sucking at life, like on deployments and some different things, and then you come home and you have like running water and a toilet that flushes. You don't have to burn, nobody has to burn the shit. Actually, you have like nutritious, fresh food from a market somewhere, or, you can, you have just normal things that people have in first world countries. You're like, wow, I am so grateful. It's kind of can be culture shock from a lot of people coming back from deployments. Like, why are all these people bitching all the time about nothing? They don't realize how good they have it. And it's because people get used to things and then they start to lack gratitude. Well, pridefulness is one of those things that destroys your gratitude. And the thing is, gratitude is one of the biggest joys you can have in life. You cannot be anxious or feeling sorry about yourself or sad or depressed or any of those things and be grateful at the same time. Your mind cannot be in a state of gratitude and a state of negativity at the same time. Those two things don't fit together. So if you get used to being able to be grateful and being able to be grateful on a consistent basis, that can act as a springboard for you to be even more successful and to also enjoy that journey along the way. And some of you guys need to hear this because you're not grateful enough in your life. I know I'm not grateful enough oftentimes. I let things get to me sometimes, and and so then I have to remind myself to be grateful. We all need to do that. But pridefulness in your ego is going to get in the way of that gratitude, because you're going to say, well, I deserve these things, or I sure, of course, or I accomplished these things, so I don't need to be grateful for them. Well, really is you could have gotten something uncontrollable happen to you. And your quest to accomplish things, and you may have done things to accomplish things, which is worth celebrating, right? Let's say you had discipline and you overcame some hardship and you accomplished something good, right? Cool. You should be happy about that. But you didn't get you get into an accident, a car accident, or something happened to you on the way to your success, put you in the hospital, kill you. That didn't happen to you, right? Something out of your control. You didn't get robbed or or beaten or killed by somebody doing a home invasion. You didn't end up with some sort of disease or something that you couldn't cure. You didn't end up with some bad luck situation along the way. I mean, there's a lot of things that happened that put things in your favor for your effort to work. So, right, you've had opportunities, and those opportunities, many of those things were not in your control. They were blessings, right? You had other people helping you along the way. You maybe had staff that did work for you and that did a good job, right? Like, there's all sorts of things that you have to be grateful for. Even just getting up in the morning and being able to breathe fresh air, something to be grateful for. And that brings joy to your life. But if you're so busy thinking you're so fucking cool, right? And you're so busy trying to prove to everybody else how cool you are, it's really hard to be grateful then. And you rob yourself of that joy that you could be having, and that fulfillment that gratitude gives you. So that's really my talk for today. Okay. And we're going to go through these 7 deadly things. All right. Because they're interesting ideas to explore. When you look at them, they really are ways that dudes just destroy their lives. Right. Now, what's the opposite of pride? It's humility. So a little bit, humility doesn't mean, feeling, I don't know, just not being willing to celebrate your accomplishments. Humility doesn't mean lacking confidence. You can be a confident person. You can be sure of yourself. You can be driven, motivated, and still be humble. Humility means that you're going to check yourself. You're going to realize that you're not the most important person always, that other people maybe are important too, right? You're going to care about other people around you as you are doing things in life. And you're going to maybe have a better way of having accountability for yourself. If you're not walking around trying to tell yourself you're the shit all the time, right? Then you can maybe look at yourself a little bit and see where you're making mistakes and fix things and do better. So humility, and having a bit of humility, allows you to do better. And that humility is kind of that counteracting or antithesis of having that toxic pride, we could call it, right? So having that vice of pride, right? And so try to think about that, and think about all the things that you're protecting yourself from. What things are you embarrassed about? What things are you egotistical about that you are finding ways to tell yourself bullshit stories around so that you can't see the truth, take action, and do better? Where are you coping and capping? Ask yourself that question and take yourself down a few notches off this pride thing. Stop letting it destroy you, all right, as many people are allowing it to do right now. And as the internet and all of the self-help spaces right now, particularly for men, are pushing you to do, right? Take yourself off this pridefulness. That pridefulness vice is a recipe for your downfall, your destruction. Okay, really is. All right, that's it.